Well, good morning, everyone, from St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar here, and whether you are joining us here in person on Park Avenue or joining us online at stbarts.org, it is my joy and delight to welcome you here and welcome you to the forum, where each week we have sacred conversations about the things that matter. And as we approach Pride Sunday and the Pride March next week, today we are looking at an exciting new film, wonderfully made, about the experience of LGBTQ+ people, about especially coming out of the Roman Catholic Church, and about a very special art project. So to say more about our guests and our topic of discussion today, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, the Reverend Zach Niang.
Thank you. It is my joy and privilege to welcome first Yuval David, director of Wonderfully Made. He is an Emmy Award-winning actor, host, filmmaker, and advocate with a creative mantra to entertain, uplift, and inspire. As a filmmaker, Yuval produces, directs, and writes short and feature films, documentaries, and web series, as well as digital TV content. His work has been screened at international film festivals, receiving over 100 awards. He also advocates for all marginalized communities through his creative work and social action, including the National LGBTQ Task Force, GLAAD, Rainbow Railroad, Freedom House, End Jew Hatred, and the Shoah Foundation, as well as many others. He is joined by Mark McDonald, executive producer of Wonderfully Made. Mark is a former partner of Skadden, where he specialized for 31 years in corporate restructurings. He now serves as an independent director in distressed workout and crisis situations, and co-founded and leads Catholic Renewal, a charity operated in coordination with Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York, and sits on the boards of Brooklyn Jesuit Prep and Brooklyn Legal Services, a school and free legal services provider that predominantly serves people of color. He is a major supporter of America, having helped it produce the 6-part podcast, Plague, Untold Stories of AIDS and the Catholic Church. Please join me in welcoming Yuval and Mark.
Well, firstly, when is your radio show? What a great radio voice, right?
If I end up getting defrocked for one reason or another, that might be
then talk
a good
to me.
backup
I
plan.
will help you set that up. I always love to hear someone who has a good microphone voice, I call it. That was great.
Well, thank you, and it's just great to have you both here. I'd love to just jump right into it and ask, how did this film and art project come to be?
Well, he actually only realized this once we started sharing the film. The he I'm speaking about is this guy, my husband, Mark McDermott, over here. He's the muse of this project. And it was it actually was funny, strange, and dare I say queer for me to realize that only once audiences started to view this film did they recognize that he is the muse of the project. It started out because Mark was...
Can I interrupt
Please.
you 1 second?
Go for it.
So I was a corporate attorney on Wall Street for 31 years, kind of a brass-knuckled thing. I've never been called a muse before.
He has been called amusing. But look, what happened was I recognized that Mark was sitting by the computer searching for an image, for Catholic or Christian iconography that represented him as a gay Christian. He was looking for something that really would speak to him, and he was searching and he was finding things, and I kept peeking over his shoulder as he was typing and seeing, and this was, I don't even know how long this was going on for. I think it was a period of months. And finally I said to him, you married an artist, a creative. Stop looking for something, let's create it. Because the truth is, if you, a man who's openly gay, who's active in the LGBTQ community, who's active in the Catholic and the Christian communities, who does all of this work for organizations, if you are struggling, imagine the struggles that people who don't have that support system. Imagine the struggles that they're facing. So let's create something that is for you and for anybody who, like you, is seeking something. And that was the birth of this project. It started as an art project, saying, let's do photo art. And then because I'm not really good at doing anything small, I said, well, let's create a short form documentary that tells the story of what it's like to create this compelling, moving art project. And then that 10-minute short film turned into a 25-minute short film, and then we started speaking with people who've dedicated their lives to this specific intersectional identity, and it turned into a 40-minute short film, and then an hour-length short film, and all of a sudden it became a 95-minute full-length featured documentary that we've been producing and working on since 2018 in order to really tell the story.
That's so beautiful, and it strikes me as such a wonderful image, really, for the church at its best, coming together to create the kind of church, the kind of community that we want to be. In the early days of LGBTQ advocacy here in our own tradition, the Episcopal Church, the motto of the organization doing that work, Integrity, the motto was all the sacraments for all the baptized. Why should we baptize a baby if we're not willing to marry them to the person they fall in love with later in life? And that also speaks to the fact that the church is the community of the baptized, and we're invited to come and be church together and co-create church together and with God. So I think there's a beautiful resonance here. The truth is that the church has always had LGBTQ people. Are we willing to recognize and affirm and acknowledge them? So I'd love to continue in that conversation. I wonder if it would be a good moment to kind of set the stage and play the trailer from the film.
Sure. How's the volume on the...
I think we're good. We have the remote, if need be, to crank it up.
All right.
The gold standard is a father and a mother creating a family. That's what was ordained by nature and nature's law.
Historically, in the Catholic Church, LGBT people have been largely invisible. Sexual activity is sinful. And when they are talked about, they're talked about in terms of sinful.
You don't want the gay liberation movement to morph into something like the Ku Klux Klan.
This is the weaponization of ministry, to make us believe that we are not the people God made us to be.
We can't imagine ourselves in the image of God. That does irreparable spiritual harm to us.
Iconography is important because we believe in a God that we want to have a relationship with.
This project welcomes LGBTQ+ people by depicting Jesus as suffering with and for them.
When we put out a casting call, we got about 500 submissions.
I had the unfortunate event of being kicked out of my church.
People like me weren't welcome in that space.
We're using the power of art to help LGBTQ people and create change.
Human beings can change things. You can change things. I was doing youth ministry, and then they changed direction, and they kicked out all the LGBTQ people.
It's just exhausting. It's unforgivable that we put these kinds of burdens on one another.
The LGBTQ community is under attack. It's really impossible to underestimate the impact that the Catholic Church has had in a very detrimental way.
The old ways have to change.
When you persecute the LGBT person, you're persecuting Christ.
No one can silence you. No one can silence me except myself.
These images tell the story of God and our LGBTQ sisters and brothers.
That is beautiful.
To see LGBTQ suffering reflected in the story of Jesus.
This is the stuff that I should have seen when I was younger.
Oh, how gorgeous.
These images can be life-giving.
This is beautiful.
Wow. And if that piques your curiosity, I hope that you will come and join us for our exclusive screening right here at 12:30 p.m. this afternoon. But what a remarkable trailer in and of itself. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about So this is a film and an art project, and how those things work in tandem, and what you're trying to do with this film as you take it around the country and the world.
So it started as the art project. I couldn't find anything that I thought represented LGBTQ people in the face of Jesus, and so it started just as a very tiny art project, grew into one where we had 9 models of different ethnicities and gender identities involved, and brought in some of the top people in the world to help create it, including one of the top 10 photographers and stylist teams in the world. And some point in there, it started to turn into a film. Yuval said, let's make it 6 minutes. And then one day he went out on the street during World Pride with our cinematographer, and he came back and he said, great, we've got 9 hours of footage. And that's when I knew this was not going to be a 6-minute production, so it just kept growing from there and there. And this is a piece of advocacy. We call it art for social change. That's kind of the idea here. And one of the lines I have in the movie, in fact it was in the trailer there, is that reasoned argument doesn't always seem to win over people. I don't know what will sometimes, but a lot of times an image can help, just like a story. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's one thing you can make an argument through a story. It's something people can relate to. And if we all believe that God is in all of us, well then every face of every person you see is God. And the problem is, God for 1,700 years, Jesus has always been represented as a white, cisgender male with blonde hair and blue eyes, which we know is not historically accurate. But let's try to make it real, make him real through the faces of as much diversity as we possibly can. So that's how the 2 pieces came to be together, totally unplanned. Not necessarily how I would recommend going about making a documentary.
Blood, sweat, and tears, and making a independent, self-produced feature-length film and art project is truly blood, sweat, and tears.
It is. So that's how it came to be and what we're trying to accomplish with it. Now we're having screenings all over the country. We've had about a dozen, we've got about 40 more in process. Ireland is coming up this Wednesday, I believe. Yeah. Several in Canada, Rome, England, Germany. And really it's kind of a celebration of us. That's what I like to say. Bring our people together and let's just celebrate ourselves, get the art out there, and we love very much that you put the art right out there on Park Avenue for everybody to see.
It's huge.
But it's first and foremost, I wanted it to be a gift for all of us. If we help change a few minds, great. I'm not sure we really will, but these are just a celebration of who we are.
And if you haven't seen it, do take a look at the north end of our Park Avenue facade. We have a number of the images. We're not going to show them all because we want you to come back at 12:30 so you can see all the images then. But I think there's something so provocative and so powerful about the way that arts, and particularly public arts, can really work to at least create a conversation, if not change hearts and minds. Of course, sometimes it can also inflame folks' sensibilities. And to that end, I'm wondering what the response has been like as you've taken this all around. It's so amazing that you're going straight to Rome, really the heart of Roman Catholicism. I wonder about that. How the response has been, for better and for worse?
I would say that the vast majority of the responses have been very positive, where people are reaching out, and the amount of times we hear people saying, I wish I saw this a long time ago. I wish I saw this when I was coming out. I wish I saw this when my child was struggling. I wish, and I'm sharing actual comments that have stood out, I wish I saw this before my son committed suicide so I could have shown him that there were people like him. I wish I saw so many of these types of comments, even from the people who were involved in the production. And that was something that, as the director of this film, made me realize that I had to turn the cameras on ourselves. I had to turn the cameras on the people who were involved. We had people who had their own awakenings of their own identity because of being part of this project, that they realized they had a community. In New York City, people who are involved in so many places, and this gave them a way to recognize that an intersectional identity is not only okay, it's just normal. It's part of our exploration of human existence. This the feedback that we've been getting has, like I said, predominantly been very positive. As you can imagine, putting things on social media, the social media trolls, I think, is that what we call them? They show up. And there have been articles that have also been written in massive publications. One of my, I was going to say my favorites, it's not my favorite, but one that received a lot of traction is Yuval David, the Jew homosexualist filmmaker, makes Jesus gay. Oh, and they referred to my husband in quotation marks in the article multiple times with quotation marks. So that provoked a lot of hatred. And every time when I open up my social media on my device, and I have a bad habit of doing that in the morning, first thing in the morning, which I'm trying to shift to having my morning meditations instead. I can't be perfect, and I recommend for everybody else, join me in morning meditations before you look at your phone. I'm not perfect. I'm not haven't achieved it yet, but I see a lot of very hateful messages. So it takes, just like I said at first before we started the event, move up, move forward, sit towards the front. It takes one person to do that first for other people to feel comfortable to do that as well. And it's the same thing with the creation of art and with putting yourselves out there and for saying, I'm going to turn the cameras on my husband. He is the muse, whether he recognizes this or not, for this project, to do something for him and for people like him who are craving something. And maybe that will set the path for other people to walk with us and lead and move beyond us. And that leads me to saying the social media links are up there. It takes a community of support to get the message out to people who need to see it. As I mentioned, even there were people in the film who live in New York City who you'd think are the most comfortable with themselves ever, who started to open up about their own hardships. So it is the power of a message that we can share. I've been doing a bunch of public speeches and workshops lately about PTSD and how people can live with PTSD, move beyond it. And one of the challenging things is we recognize that there are a lot of people who have a hardship who don't extend their hands, even though there are people out there to help them. So sometimes it's up to us to just leave our hands out open. And that's what I hope to do with this project.
I know that resonates with all of the clergy here in the room. Time and again, time after time, we have folks coming into the Episcopal Church, finding this incredible community of inclusion for all gender and sexual identities. And time and again, they say, why did it take me so long to find out that you exist? I never knew that this was a thing. Where have you been all my life? And sometimes folks will say, well, is pride something that we should be celebrating, right? Before pride cometh before the fall, and the Song of Mary, she says that God will cast down the prideful and all of that. And yes, I think there is a certain pride that is infused with narcissism, right? But Jesus tells his disciples to shine with light, shine with love. And so often I think that our tradition has been the best kept secret in town. We have a bushel basket problem. We're afraid to let our light shine, to let our freak flag or our pride flag fly. But it's so important. And I wish that we didn't have such a corner on the market for being a sacramental church grounded in the ancient tradition that is fully welcoming of LGBTQ+ persons. But so often it feels like we are the corner on the market. But what would it look like if every corner had a church where all were welcome, grounded in the sacraments and the Eucharist and the historic church? It seems very timely that you both are here. Across town right now, the Outreach Conference is happening. And I wonder if, Mark, you want to tell us a little bit about that group, that ministry, and where are you finding signs and seeds of hope and encouragement?
So the Outreach Conference grew out of a website that Father Jim Martin and I launched a year ago in May, outreach.faith. It's a Catholic LGBTQ resource filled with articles long and short about things such as the clobber verses of the Bible, the ones that ostensibly condemned homosexual behavior. And that website has really taken off. And then as part of that, he had the idea to have an annual conference. This is the second one. It's up at Fordham. It's 3 days long. Several panels of people and topics from all over the world, of interest all over the world. About 300 people there this year. So and last year was maybe 200, 250. And it's an occasion for people who are leaders in their locales and others who deal with LGBTQ ministry to show up, to socialize, to compare notes, to learn things. And some of it is group therapy, which is actually really important here. I mean, it is. As I said about the film, it's a celebration of us. That's what this is. Now, for those who don't know, Father Jim Martin is the leading voice in seeking greater church change to accept LGBTQ people. Gets a lot of fire for that. He is a regular correspondent with Pope Francis. We got a letter from Pope Francis in connection with this conference this year and last year. But there are also a lot of other heavy-duty voices that are there. They're all in our film, by the way, or at least I can't say all, but a lot of the leading ones are in our film. And we had our first protesters yesterday, which made us feel good, I guess. You're doing something right. Church Militant is the name of the organization, and it is militant. And so there's a lot that comes out of this, whether it will lead to change. Again, I don't know. You know, there are many people set in their ways. In the Catholic tradition, here's the problem we have. If it's all about sexual ethics, broadly defined, if you start pulling this thread and say, okay, we're not going to call gay people, lesbian people, if we're not going to call them objectively disordered, which is the catechism of the Catholic faith, okay? I am objectively disordered, and our relationship is an intrinsic moral evil, according to Catholic doctrine. If you pull that thread there, then all of a sudden you're saying it's okay to have non-unitive and procreative sex, which is another Catholic piece of Catholic dogma. That is the only way you can have sexual relations, is in the context of marriage, unitive and procreative. Well, that's been a big one for a long time, but it really gets in trouble if you okay relations between same-sex couples. And once that happens, lots of things start to collapse. And when you talk to bishops behind closed doors, they will say there are two reasons they're hesitant to push this thread. Number one is money. A lot of the conservatives give more money than progressives, and that's a big one. And then this one right here, they're afraid that the entire edifice will come down. And Father Brian Massengale, the only openly gay African-American Catholic priest in the world, who's in our film, a good friend of ours.
The only openly gay black Catholic priest in the world.
Yeah, exactly. He said yesterday, every single church denomination that has had to face this issue has faced schism. And when it comes to us, the Catholic Church, there's this huge emphasis on unity. But he said, you know what? Unity cannot be the primary goal. It's got to be justice. There was a lot of quiet murmuring in the crowd when he said that, but he's right. Sorry, I didn't mean to be so long, but there's a lot to everything that's going on.
I mean, one thing that I disagree with what you said is, and you've said it twice just this morning, that you don't know if this is going to create any change. We've already created change with this project in people who have wept, who have been moved, who have been felt seen. And the truth is, if all we succeed with this project is saving one person's life, then that's a huge success.
Yeah, you're right. It would be a Latinx model in our film here. Max is his name. He told us that he's basically thrown out of his home. And the day we were shooting him on set, he called his mom that he'd had an estranged relationship with. He says, Mom, I'm playing Jesus. And then when we had the screening at St. Ignatius up the street, 300 people showed up. We were kind of blown away by that. He brought his mom. She'd never seen this before. And I didn't have the chance to meet her. They disappeared kind of shortly afterwards. And I learned later that she was so kind of overcome with the experience that they just had to take a break. So yes, there's an example of one.
In Judaism, and so I'm Jewish, Mark is Catholic. In Judaism, there's an expression.
Technically, I'm Jewish or cashew. That's what I'm.
All right. Thank you. You can use that. That's good. I saw you like that. In Judaism, there's an ancient. Oh my gosh! Now I'm thinking in Hebrew. Whenever I think about religion, my brain goes to Hebrew, and then I have to translate in my head to English. There's an ancient saying that says, to save one person's life is equivalent to saving an entire world. And it's moments like that that make me think, wow, all the blood, sweat, and tears that we were joking about, and how hard and challenging it is to do a self-produced independent production. It's like, it was worth it. And now it just goes back to the concept of community and of sharing stories that are so very important. And that's really what we tried to do here. So even though I'm Jewish and I'm not of the Christian faith, my approach throughout this project was to create a stage, or even just to polish the stage and let other people dance on it. And that's really what I did. Let people tell their stories and just create a platform for them.
That's so beautiful. And I'm struck by this kind of theological, idea that if you pull the one thread out, it all will collapse. And to me, it's just so inconsistent with the tradition and the narratives and the practices that we've received. To say that marriage must be unitive and procreative means that we should never marry individuals who are above the childbearing age. And yet we marry couples in their 70s, 80s, even 90s routinely in the church, as I believe the Catholic Church does as well. Today in the 11 o'clock service, I believe we'll hear the story of Sarah and Abraham becoming pregnant at advanced age. And Sarah laughs at this preposterous promise that new life can come from a relationship arrangement thought to be all but dead. And so I think, to me, Pride is about celebrating all the diverse avenues from which new life can be born and stewarded and celebrated with joy.
Which is why they named their son Yitzchak, which is Hebrew for will laugh, because she thought, how ridiculous having a child at an advanced age.
Amen. And as our presiding bishop says, he says as he gets older and older, he realizes she wasn't laughing at the idea that she could be pregnant as much as she was laughing at the idea that he could be a father.
Another thing you mentioned about, our shared faith, and it is a shared faith that we all have here. I look at a lot of Catholic dogma as barnacles on the side of a beautiful ship. It's time to start knocking some of them off. But they also kind of forget the Gospels. I mean, at one of these discussions here today, I said, in Deuteronomy it says the following: if you have a disrespectful and rebellious son, you shall take him outside and stone him to death. And I said, if that's really true and we should do that, there will be no adult males in our society. Like literally. We don't do that. There are a lot of things in the Bible we do not do, even though they're there. That doesn't mean we disrespect the Bible, but some things have in fact changed just a little bit. Slavery was, of course, sanctioned in those days. We don't do that anymore. But more importantly, I've written a few articles on this, and I'm not the only one who's made these observations, but how can you say that a Jesus who speaks with the Samaritan woman at the well would condemn gay people? How about a Jesus who, in effect, forgives and lets go the adulteress? He's not going to put up with stoning her to death. A Jesus who responds to a tax collector like Matthew, invites him into the fold. A Jesus who tells, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Zacchaeus, I believe, the little man up in the tree, I'm going to come and dine at your house. A Jesus who heals the centurion's son. Are you really telling me that this Jesus, if you were here today, and say, no. It works for everybody except you people over here, you gay people, you lesbian people. It just makes no sense to me.
As someone once said, don't talk to me about Leviticus unless you've sacrificed a goat today, right? What seems so obvious to us, but I think that this project has certainly already begun to change hearts and minds through the power of representation. In the same way that when people see a non-traditional, maybe male couple playing the Holy Family at a Christmas pageant, or seeing diverse representation in the clergy for the first time, it invites folks to imagine something outside the status quo. I've been struck at the timeliness of this conversation as well with the Southern Baptist Convention this past week, kind of doubling down on not allowing women to be in the role of teaching pastor, elder. And one of the things, though, that struck me is there's been so much outrage around this particular denomination, and yet not so much with the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. Folks, still no women priests in the Roman Catholic Church, right?
Hey, we need a diversion once in a while. We're the focus of everything. It's not everything, of course, but we get a lot of grief. So I'm sorry, I'm being flippant, but go ahead.
Well, no, but I think that folks have so accepted the status quo. Well, the Roman Catholic Church only has male priests, and that's just the way it is, and it's going to be that way forever and ever and ever until the end of the ages. Amen. And yet, it is 2023, right? It just seems... So I wonder if any kind of intersectional issues around women's ordination, mandatory clergy celibacy has come up in this conversation, in this project.
Absolutely. Well, it's like the concept of unraveling that Mark introduced. When you deal with one specific community, one specific intersectional identity, you're now dealing and representing all of the other intersections that person or that issue relates to. It's just how the same example of how the LGBTQ movement, and I do prefer to refer to it as a movement more than a community, is the LGBTQ movement rode the coattails and continues to ride the coattails of the women's movement and the feminist movement. When we started to speak about what is gender, what can women do, should women be allowed to explore the vastness of the human experience? Oh, well, if women are doing this, then everybody else should, because women are over half the world population. And we have addressed that in the film as well, because it's hard not to. I firmly believe that and hope that we will start to see many more women leaders, and I think that that's one way that our world can be a better place, just because of who women are and what women represent, and the fact that women are people and human beings, and I just don't understand why we don't see as many women in leadership roles. Now, if you look throughout the advocacy space, organizations, nonprofits, even governmental organizations, you will see so many women working throughout, but still, at many of those leadership roles, you find men. And I'm hoping that we will start seeing a vast change like yesterday.
Thank you. Yes, the stained glass ceiling sometimes.
Stained glass ceiling
in the church. Well, I think we already have some questions coming in. We would love to receive your questions from the audience here in person and online. And I'll turn it over to Peter.
Yes, we have a few minutes left for questions. If you're here in person, Suzanne Forster has some question cards that you can take from her, fill it out, hand it back to her, and she'll get them up here. If you're joining us online, you can put your question into the live chat on YouTube, the comments section on Facebook, or you can email me, pthompson@stbarts.org, pthompson@stbarts.org. You can do that if you're in the room, too. We do have a question already from our online audience. What was your favorite moment in creating this work?
So, I thought that my husband really showed an unbelievable act of love, a Jewish man who's, I wouldn't call you especially religious, okay? You're a humanist, which I've always loved and respected, but to give the way he gave, to create this film about a different faith, my faith. And there were times I didn't really grasp that like I should have. And it still makes me feel bad when I think about it. But there was one day on set these days on set, we had 3 days of shooting, like 15-hour days, 40 people on set. It was unbelievable orchestration here. He was the director. Absolutely tireless energy trying to draw out of each actor certain emotions that we wanted to evoke in these images. And I just never seen such tireless, not only work, but really getting emotionally connected with each person. I mean, to do that for 3 consecutive days with all these people was just kind of mind-blowing to me. And I realized this is just unbelievable. And I couldn't believe what he did, and I loved him for it and still love him for it. So that was a big moment for me.
I mean, one of the most beautiful elements of this production is when we no longer have ownership of it, is seeing how audiences respond to viewing the film and recognizing, just like every other art form, it's now no longer mine or ours. It's shared. People own the experience and define and interpret the film and the art in their own way, and that's what art does. You mentioned earlier, Zach, that the art isn't only meant to represent and make people feel good about themselves, it's also meant to provoke and get people angry. That's the power of art, is to get people to think about something. And if people are offended by it, heavens forbid, we have a woman Jesus and a trans Jesus and a black Jesus, which, by the way, has been one of the most problematic representations for people, and that says a lot about our society. We're supposed to provoke it. So I think that definitely has been my favorite part. My other favorite is in the post-production, when having all of the things that we photographed. So as Mark said, we had multiple days of the photo shoot, and then many, many days of filming all of the interviewees. Most people glamorize what happens on set, but they don't realize that that is a very small percentage of the production time, is what happens when you're actually filming and capturing the sound. Post-production is when you can make or break production. And focusing on the audio, on the sounds, was very compelling for me, to sit there and think about a sound like that when somebody's rubbing their hands together during an interview, and finding that sound and enhancing it while diminishing the other sounds. What do hands convey? And those of you who are coming, and I hope all of you are coming at 12:30 to view it, you'll see that apparently I have an obsession with hands. I never realized it, but you'll see so many hands, and only now that I watch the film, I'm like, oh, there are a lot of hands in this. Because the use of hands conveys more than what our faces do. We're so used to giving our poker face. If to hide my emotions, I might not show you what I'm thinking because I'll give you a specific face, but what my hands are doing are so revealing. And I found that in many of the interviewees, both on set and the interviewees who are leaders in this movement, who are so media trained, but then to focus on their hands and to see what they were revealing. And they signed a contract saying that I can use whatever they do during the interviews. So I definitely used what I saw they were revealing with their movement. Anyway, I have a lot of favorites. I'm so bad at answering the favorite question. I never have one.
Well, we have a lot of questions, so we'll try to get through as many of them as possible. Homophobia sometimes has a loving veneer. People say, I love the person, but not the sin. Did you address arguments like that in the film?
We did not focus on that phrase, thought about it, decided to discard it. I purposely decided to discard it. It is so beneath reality that I just didn't want to even go there. We go so many other places and have so many other arguments and punches that we make that we don't do it in the film. But I guess the closest we come at some point, how can you possibly separate who a person is from how they act out their beliefs, their faith? One of our interviews does say that without talking about that phrase. But, how can you? I mean, how can you say, well, we welcome you, but not if you but we can't let you live out who you are. I think that's what she says in the film. And that to me is really the answer to the question. I will never understand the people who can't grasp that basic essential right there.
Did you address religious traditions other than Christianity and the Roman Catholic Church in the movie?
Predominantly Catholicism, however, a lot of what you will see in there was similar to what every other denomination has faced and still holds true to. Okay, they may not use the words objectively disordered, but insert your other disgusting phrase, and that's where many other denominations have been and still are. And so while you see people in Roman collars and that kind of thing, its audiences goes way beyond Catholicism, I think, and we try to be attentive to that in here, because so much of what is said applies across the board.
And as an answer to that, what art does and what storytelling does is it allows people to resonate with a story when it's about somebody else and they're able to understand something about themselves. It's why we like our books and our films and our television shows and the radio programs or whatever we're listening to, where people can identify and grow based on how they respond to a narrative when it's somebody else's story. We screened the film at the only LGBTQ film festival in the Middle East, which is in Tel Aviv, in Israel. It was a mostly Jewish audience, people who didn't even realize how challenging being an LGBTQ Christian is, because in a mostly Jewish country, it's not something that they think about. And there were people who were weeping during the film and speaking afterwards and saying, I just realized this about myself, or now we're going to do this about us. And that's the universality that we tried to have within this film, even though it focuses on Catholicism.
I think this is a question for you, Mark, as well as kind of the question for guests in the film itself. Why stay in the Roman Catholic Church if it's caused all this pain?
Yeah, this is a very good question, Mark.
I get.
Who said he's Jewish?
Yeah.
It would be so much easier to be a Jew.
My mother-in-law sometimes looks at me and says, it'd be so much easier if you just convert. So I get asked this all the time. I did yesterday. Many of the clergy got asked that yesterday. Here's my answer. And it's not satisfactory to most people, but that's fine. I'm the only one who has to satisfy. I get the damage. I would like to try to effectuate some change from within rather than without. I think you can be more effective within than without. There's a little bit of a sense in the Catholicism of circling the wagons a bit. Hey, if we're going to throw rocks, we throw the rocks, not you people on the outside. It's a little bit aggravating in that regard. So there's a chance that maybe, I can help more still being part of it, but that's actually a little part of it. I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy. It's all I know, frankly. I've come to this beautiful church many times before and thought about bailing on Catholicism. And not just here, but Buddhism, Hinduism. I thought about them all for a while, but what it really comes down to is I believe, and what appeals to me most, is the mystical element of religion. And I believe that Catholicism, and Episcopalianism is very close to this, I know, is very good at capturing and evoking a sense of the mystery of the divine majesty and our lives through the sacraments, through ritual, through honoring art, iconography, through having grand music. Okay, it's not just a show. Some people say that, well, it's just a show, it's a ritual. Yeah, it is. And for something, when you're dealing with something that is as ineffable as the divine majesty and what life even is, words really don't work. I said that once already. There has to be something that takes you into that realm, and it's not just some exercise in self-improvement or whatever. What I said yesterday was, I use this and prayer to re-energize myself so that I can in turn go out in the world and try to do better for other people. It's not just me. So, long answer to your question, but that's a mishmash of what it all is for me.
Okay, 2 quick questions before I hand it back to Zach. First, where is the film available? People can come back today and see the screening after the 11 a.m. service at 12:30. Is the film available anywhere else? And then what is next for the two of you as creators?
So where the film is available, we're right now screening in film festivals and in community or social impact screenings like the one we're having here today at 12:30. The reason these screenings are important is it proves to the powers that be within major networks and streaming platforms that there is an audience for this. For so many films, there's a space for religious films, and there's a space for LGBTQ films, but we don't see many that intersect the two. And I invite you to call out names of ones that you might know. So we need to prove that there is an audience that is represented by this, that wants it and wants to share it. So the answer to that question is, yes, we hope to get on a major platform. We're also, Mark is very involved in eventually getting it up on platforms where anybody could see it anywhere in the world. But we need you and all of you over there. I see the camera in the back. I just waved at the camera up there, by the way. Everybody's turning around to see it's the one up there. We need all of you to help us. Go onto the social media links. Say and tweet and Instagram, or share the link of the website and say you were at this event. Other people should see it. It's how the audience becomes a vital part of the production team, the community that shares the message.
Well, thank you both so much, and I can't wait to see the documentary myself. It is an exclusive screening today at 12:30 p.m., so I have not yet seen it, and I really cannot wait. You know, we believe it or not, we attract some trolls now again at St. Bart's.
I believe it.
And most recently, you know, someone made up this fake kind of newspaper tabloid that said, "Park Avenue Episcopalians, the pride of Christ." And they meant it to be derogatory.
That sounds
and I
great.
Thought, wow, what a wonderful affirmation.
That's great.
And reminder, here at St. Bart's and throughout the Episcopal Church, we believe that we are the pride of Christ, that by virtue of our baptism and our creation as children of God who bear God's image, we are all beloved of God. And so thank you both for helping us to live into that promise and that message today as we celebrate Pride here in New York. And we look forward to being with you later this afternoon. Everyone, Yuval David and Mark McDermott. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. You should print that out.